Alright, it is 3 January 2016 and I just started turning these wine bottle stopper thingies. This one here is the first one that I'd made, and this one here is the second. The second one is much better than the first one, and I'm going to explain to you some of the reasons for that, and hopefully give you some things to avoid. The problem with this one is if I rotate this and you look the way the wood meets the bottle stopper blank, you'll see it's not centered. It's not even. This one here is perfectly even, and that just has to do with the way we manufactured it. So let me show you how this works here. You can see the big problem here is this insert's not centered. And the reason for that is the way that a lot of these books tell you how to make these is you basically chuck up a piece of wood like this, insert it into a scroll chuck, and then you fashion your top out of this piece of wood using a live center over here at this end to help hold it in place. And then eventually you're just going to create a little nub there and tool off that nub, and you're going to have your piece here, which you then can tool that off, and what you're left with is a piece that will look like this, but it won't have a hole in the end. So then you have to figure out, okay, well, how do I get a hole in the end? And when you take it over to your drill press and you put it on there, if you're like me, I just use a spade bit, and trying to hold this by hand and the spade bit wanting to torque is just almost impossible to get that hole centered, at least for me. Some people out there might be able to do it, but I had difficulties because that is not centered. So I come up with some different ways of doing this, and I will show you how those work, and it's much easier for me to make a good piece using these other techniques, so I'll show you that. Alright, so here you can see we've kind of got this the way some of the books I looked at told me to make this, which is you just kind of create a little nub here that you can cut off, and then this is held in a scroll chuck, and so once you cut this nub off you can finish the end while it's spinning, and then once you've got the whole thing done you'll just cut it off here again, tool that off, and then you're left with the problem putting the hole in there. One of the other problems with doing it this way is making sure that this size here is the same size for your bottle stopper blank, and I'll show you the way that I do it the other way. You don't have this issue, but the way, if you're doing it this way, what you basically have to do is you have to take a pair of calipers, measure this diameter here, and then check and make sure that you've got the right diameter here, and mill that down until you've got it right. And the way I'm going to show you how to do it is eliminates that, makes it much easier. Alright, so again, using the method I saw in the books, I've just cut this off, so now we can move the tailstock back and finish that off either with a tool or of course, you know, the sandpaper sort of thing. And then once you're done with that, you cut this end off here also. Alright, so now I've cut this off, which leaves me with this end here that I have to drill. And again, the problem I've got is putting a spade bit into that, getting it perfectly centered along the rotational axis is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So we're going to start over and show you how I came up with doing this, and I think you'll find it much easier and give you a much better product. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chuck up this piece of wood with the friction bit on that end and a live center on that end, and this is just an old piece of barn wood, but it has the amount of thickness that I need. I'm going to, since this end is a little bit more chewed up and I won't get as much good wood out of that end as this end, I'm going to put my insert into this end. So and then this end here will be my top, because I'll be cutting off more of that material around that edge. And so I'm just going to put this end on the live center side, the end that I'm going to put the insert into, and then this end will chuck up with my friction bit there. And and then I'll show you what we do after that. So I'm just going to round this up, and we'll pick it up after we get this square chunk round. Alright, so I've taken off my corners on this. I still have some more wood to remove because I got some decay. Remember, this is just an old piece of barn board, so I've got some decay there, and a little bit over here where the old oxidized decayed wood is still showing, but it's round enough for me to move on to the next step, which is going to be drilling the center hole down here at this end. So we'll show you how we do that. Alright, so what I've done is I've replaced my live center on this end with a drill bit, and this is just a 9/16 spade bit. 9/16 is what I use if I'm putting these type of inserts in it, and then I use a 1/2 inch if I'm putting these type of inserts that need to be glued in. I only use these if I've got a smaller diameter piece of wood that I'm working with and it won't take the larger one, or if it's something that maybe is spalted and the wood's not too firm and it won't hold up to these knife threads on the outside of this 3/8 insert. So again, I don't like using the glue-in ones because it takes forever for the glue to dry, because it doesn't get access to oxygen at the bottom very well, and so it takes a couple days for these to set up right. But at any rate, 9/16 for the double threaded ones, and then 1/2 inch for the ones you glue in. At any rate, so we're just going to turn this on, and then as we drill in, we'll keep turning our tailstock up. And I like to put just take a Sharpie and mark my drill bit to where the depth that I need to insert that into, so that way when the black disappears, I know I've gotten that in there far enough. So that's what we'll do. And sometimes these wobble quite a bit. I haven't found that to be a huge problem. It's nicer when they don't. I get a much rounder hole, but the threads are sharp enough or deep enough on those inserts to where a little bit of wobble can be tolerated, and they'll still grab pretty good. And of course, if you get too much wobble, you could always just put a little bit of wood glue in there when you screw the insert in. That would help too, but again, I can tolerate a little bit of wobble at this point. Alright, so that's in there far enough, so we'll go ahead and we'll just shut that off and extract our bit. Alright, so I've taken our spade bit out, and I'm going to put this mandrel in here. This is one I ordered online. I'll put the web address up here for you in case you need to have trouble finding one, but it's just a 3/8 thread, and it has a little spacer on here, and the spacer is just about right for these inserts. It works out well. And there's another thing I'm going to use this spacer for, which I'll show you, that comes in handy. Now, the first time I went to use this, I went to use it in my scroll chuck, this guy over here, and it did not work out too well. It's hard to center, and you see it marred up the shaft because it got off center and started wobbling like crazy. And I've tried it since on smoother parts of the shaft and tightening it up, and it's just hard to get it to actually center well with that type of scroll chuck. So I put it in here and tighten this up, and this comes out centered every time, perfect, and I don't have any problems with it. So this is what I've been using. I need to order a couple more of these drill bit drill press shanks, because I keep using them back and forth, and it'd be nice not to have to switch out every time. So I'm going to spend the 15-16 bucks that these things cost and order me a couple more. So once we got this chucked up nice and tight, you can give it a little bit of spin if you want and see that it's nice and centered. There's no wobble to that when it's pressed back in there. So next thing we're going to do is take our piece of wood here, put this back in our friction drive, and we're going to take one of these inserts, and we're going to put this put the slotted in towards that, so that way if you do have to remove it from the wood for some reason, in case you mess up the piece of wood, need your insert back for another project, you can do that. And then we're just going to put this back in here. Tighten that up and apply just a little bit of pressure. And then I'm going to turn the lathe on, and it's going to start driving, and as soon as it does, it's going to pull it this way, which means the drive is going to want to come out. So you really need to be ready to crank on this fairly quickly, depending on how slow your lathe will start, to get that to where it's pressing on there as fast as it's trying to come off of this drive unit. Otherwise, it'll just start spinning and chewing up this end. The other thing you could do is you could turn this by hand if you want to, and as you do that, you'll feel that this is starting to come loose again. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but so you would have to keep applying pressure to keep these locked up in there. But I'm going to turn it on and spin this down. Just takes about a second and works pretty good. Yep, you can see I didn't do it quite fast enough, and this end here started coming out and spinning, so we'll just finish this up by hand. Alright, so now that we get that on there, what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole piece out and we're going to switch it around. And we're going to put it over here on the drive end. So let me get this friction bit out of here, and we'll pop this other one in over here. Alright, so now I've got my drill bit over here, and we've got our insert already in here and our 3/8 mandrel, and we're just going to go ahead and put the live center over here for right now, and we're going to turn this down and get it to our final shape. Alright, the advantage of doing this way is that this spacer right here is also the exact same diameter as my wine stopper blanks. So if I turn this wood down even with this blank, it's automatically the right size. I don't have to worry about using the calipers or anything. And then I'm going to shape this here, and then I'll leave a nub here, cut it off, and then I can finish sanding it and stuff while this is spinning and the tailstock's removed. Alright, so I kind of got my shape. You'll notice that right here I've worked that down to where it's the same diameter as my spacer, which means it's the same diameter as my wine blank. And then I'm going to part this off. I'm going to part this off actually a little bit to the right of where I want it to be. I'm going to make that top kind of flat. But instead of parting it off over here on this side, I'm going to part it off over that side, so that that way as it comes apart, those center pieces of wood fibers don't pull out, and then I have a divot in the top of my wine stopper. So I'm going to part it off a little bit to the right here. Might even try to do this one-handed on the camera here, and you want to be careful you don't apply too much pressure on it, because it will get this off round. Or bend that up a little bit. You don't want this to be wobbling after you cut it off. If you apply too much torque, pressure on it this way, leverage, it will make that wobble again, and then you're left with trying to re-round it to the center. So that worked out pretty well. So now I'm just going to move my tailstock back and finish cutting off the top here. So again, you don't want to be too aggressive with your cut, because you don't want to apply too much leverage and get this thing to wobbling. So you want to gently cut your end and form it off, and then the rest of that I can finish up with some rough sandpaper. All right, so essentially I've got my finished piece here. I'm going to turn this on and run it with some sandpaper. I can even mill it again if I need to, because when I stopped it, I noticed I've got a little nick right here. that makes that not round. I think that would come out there. So I can actually mill that down a little bit, turn that down a little bit, and make it round again because it's on the center, and this is centered with my lathe, and when I take this off, it's going to be perfectly centered on my wine bottle stopper also. So I found this to just be a much easier way of doing it than to finish the piece and then try to drill that hole later. Alright, let me show you one little issue that you can run into with doing it this method is this can come loose because there's nothing holding it on this side. And if that happens, I found that what I can do is I can just press this taper into that, and I've got a little piece of wood there that won't damage my tap. And if I just apply a little bit of pressure, it'll push that Morse taper in there hard enough to where it won't spin out very easily, and I can finish my piece. Alright, so here's my finished piece. Now another issue you may run into is trying to get this off. Okay, even if you use a lever or something in there to hold that, lots of times this does not want to spin off without the wood coming off of the insert. But what I found you can do is take a piece of narrow pliers. Okay, you don't want to use something too wide because otherwise it will contact your wood and mar it. And you simply grip that, just give it a little tug, and normally it'll loosen right up. And if it doesn't, back your piece off far enough to where you can get a bigger pair of pliers in there, and then loosen it up. And voila, we have a wine bottle stopper with the insert perfectly aligned along the rotational axis, which means that when you put it on the bottle stopper blank, it will go on there nice and smooth and look nice and be perfectly centered. Ta-da! Hope you found that helpful.